The story I found was from Grandmother's Stories, and it's retold by Burle Mouton. And the story is called Go Ask the Wise Woman. A long time ago, far, far away, there was an old widow who had a daughter, and they lived on a farm. They tended this farm all by themselves, and they were very proud of their work on this farm. They milked the cow, they fed the chickens, they gathered the eggs, and they tended the fields. And the fields were rye and barley, and they did all this by themselves. And every day the cow gave good milk, and every day the chickens laid large eggs, and every day their fields were just full of bountiful crops, and they were so proud of their work. Well, one summer, it was a very hot summer, and on the longest day of the summer, they went out to the field to work in the rye field, and they cut it, and they tied it, and they worked from dawn to dusk, all day long with nary a break. And at the end of the day, they were so exhausted, and they dragged themselves back to their cottage, and on the way back, the old woman said to her daughter, "I am so tired. I can hardly think about making a proper meal." And the daughter said, "Me too. I can hardly think about making a proper meal." And when they got home, the daughter said, "Mother, you just have a seat and put your feet up, and I'll just cut up some cheese and apple, and we'll just have that kind of meal for tonight." And the old widow said, "That sounds wonderful. Thank you, daughter, because my feet are screaming." So the daughter made the meal and came over, and they shared the meager meal together. And they were just getting more and more exhausted from their day in the field. And then the old widow said, "You know, daughter, I am so tired. I don't think I can take a proper bath tonight." And the daughter said, "Me neither, Mother. I don't think I can take a proper bath." And so the daughter had an idea. She said, "Mother, why don't we just soak our feet in that old wooden tub and just have that kind of bath tonight?" And the old widow said, "You know, that sounds really good." So they each pulled a chair up to the old wooden tub, and the daughter had filled it up to the top with warm, sudsy water. And they took off their shoes, and they put their feet inside, and they just sat there, and they soaked, and they soaked, and they soaked, and they got more and more tired. And they soaked so long that the water grew cold. So they finally pulled their feet out, and they dried off their feet, and they kind of stumbled back to their bed. They were so tired that both of them fell into the bed like two rocks into a puddle and fell sound asleep. Now, they had been too tired to empty their feet water. And in the olden days, everybody knew about the feet water spirits. Now, the old widow and the daughter knew about the feet water spirits, but they were just too tired to do anything about them that night. They were so tired that they did not hear a knock at a door. They were so tired that they did not hear a tiny little voice that said, feet water, let me in! Feet water, open the door!" They were so tired that they did not hear the bucket crash on its side and spill all the water all over the floor. But they were not so tired that they missed the next thing. The door flung open, and in came all of this noise, and they hopped out of their bed, and they peeked around the corner, and there were 10 tiny little men and 10 tiny little women, and they ran into the house, and the tiny little men had little bags of wool on their shoulders, and the tiny little women had little tiny spinning wheels, 10 of them, and they were laughing and screaming and going crazy in the house, and the men were pulling out wads of wool, and the women were catching them and putting them on the spinning wheels and spinning them into yarn, and it was crazy and wild for hours and hours and hours. And the old widow and the daughter waters under their neck, and they sat there scared stiff. And the daughter said, "Mother, what are we going to do?" And the old widow said, "Daughter, go ask the wise woman." So the daughter hopped out of bed, and she marched into the kitchen pretending like she wasn't afraid, and she grabbed just another bucket, and she said, "I'm just going out to get you some water in case you're thirsty for tea," and she ran out of the house. She ran through the dark, through the forest, to the other side of the forest, all the way to the wise woman's house. And she was panting and running, and just as she got there, she could see the wise woman sitting on the porch, just rocking in the rocking chair, looking up at the stars with a cat on her lap. And she rushed up to the porch and she said, "Little men, little women, wishing, water, feetwater, yelling, dancing." And the wise woman said, "Dear, dear." And she got up out of the rocking chair and put her arm around her shoulder and she said, "You are spluttering so, I can hardly understand what you're saying. Come inside, I'll give you a cup of tea." So they went inside and she made her some tea. And they sat down and the daughter told her all about the evening, about the tiny little men, the tiny little women, the yelling, the screaming, the dancing, the yarn, the spinning wheels, and the feet water. And the wise woman nodded her head. "Ah, feet water spirits, those are up to mischief, and it will get worse before it gets better. Here's what you'll do." And she whispered the plan in the daughter's ear. Well, the daughter heard it, and she rushed right out of the house, into the dark, through the forest, on the other side of the forest, all the way to her house. Then she peeked inside her kitchen window, and sure enough, there were the 10 tiny little men and the 10 tiny little women still going at it in there, spinning and wool flying and dancing and singing like crazy, like they owned the widow's house. And she remembered what the wise woman had said, and she opened the door and she yelled, "Te kasadi, te sasadi, fire on the mountain, bonita!" And they looked around at each other, those tiny little men and women, and they gathered up all their things and they rushed out of the house. And so at that point, that's when the daughter got busy. She grabbed a mop, she started sweeping up mopping up all of the water. She got the bucket and she picked it up and she got the rest of it in there and she rushed out of the house. She poured the water into the dirt next to the shed. She turned the bucket upside down. She put a stone on top of it. She came back into the cottage and she closed the door and bolted it. And her mother said, "Oh, daughter, you have saved us from the feetwater spirits." She said, "Not yet. We have to bolt the windows and close the curtains." So they ran around the whole cottage and they bolted the windows and they closed all of the curtains and they jumped back into bed and they lay there and they waited and they waited. And you could hear a pin drop. And then there was a knock at the door. "Feetwater, feetwater, let us in! Feetwater, feetwater, open the door!" And there wasn't a sound. Then there was a little bit louder knock at the door. "Feetwater, feetwater, let us in! Feetwater, feetwater, open the door!" But there wasn't a sound. And now there was lots of knocking at the door and lots of voices at the door. "Feetwater, feetwater, let us in! Let us in! Feetwater, feetwater, open the door! Open the door!" And this time, there was a very low, gravelly voice saying, "I will not let you in, because I am here in the dirt under your stinking little feet." And with that, the tiny little men and the tiny little women looked down at their tiny little feet, and they stomped their tiny little feet because they were so furious, because they were thwarted. They could not get into that widow's cottage. The feetwater was not inside the woman's cottage. And they ran off into the woods. And that was the last they saw of those feetwater spirits. And the old widow said to the daughter, "You have finally saved us from those feetwater spirits, And the daughter said, "Oh no, the wise woman saved us from the feetwater spirits." And they cleaned up what they could that night, and they went to bed. And the next night, and the next night, and the next night, they never ever forgot to dump their feetwater ever again. They always remembered to dump the feetwater. Always.